So today, our webinar serves several purposes. First, we'd like to celebrate our 2019 achievements. As many as you know, you submitted information in your narratives, and we were compiling some of those. Many subs have reported an increase in CalFresh outreach awareness at their location. Many opened new drop-in assist locations and additional hours, and the number of new partnerships have actually exceeded our expectations, even for those who had a significant delay in contract execution. And speaking of contract execution, we would also like to thank our subs for their patience this past year with a significant delay in contract execution and subsequent delays in providing outreach and application assistance. As many of you know, those were 5 very long months. Upon reflecting on this past year, we learned a great deal, specifically about the time and effort needed to implement the contract on each site, and about how long it takes a site and a campus to actually get up and running. Our most important realization was that we have community sites and campuses who are at different stages, or what we're calling phases of development. And we want to recognize these differences, and we'll be working with you to determine what stage or phase you're currently at. So the remaining time for our webinar this morning is going to include the following. We're going to do an overview of this past year. We'll provide an explanation of what we've learned about the stages or phases of program development. We're going to review the contract requirements and some reminders. And finally, we're going to close with some time for questions. If we do have some questions that do come up during a specific topic, though, we will do our best to try to respond to those. So as we continue into our second federal fiscal year, I want to remind all of us why we are here and the ultimate goal of this contract, which is to get money into the hands and pockets of high-need individuals and students across the state so they can pay their bills, feed themselves and their households, be successful in college, graduate, obtain solid employment, and eventually become independent and self-supporting. Keeping that goal in mind, I'd like to briefly summarize our program reporting for this past year in order to inform how we're going to move forward. We had some challenges. First off, the delay in contract execution significantly impacted the amount of time we had to get up and running, and that delay is reflected in our scope of work deliverables. There were many sites that had complete turnover in leadership and staffing. And it's also important to recognize the limitations we continue to face regarding our reporting requirements and the ability to track our efforts. As you all know, our contract deliverables include the number of pre-screens, applications submitted, applications approved, and partnerships. However, this data is limited by the ability to follow an applicant through the entire 30-day process and the ability to match our efforts with county approval data. The bottom line is that these are problems with tracking, and we are working closely with the state to eliminate these challenges. We all know there's a lot of work done on our sites and on our campuses to generate these program deliverables that aren't required for reporting purposes. They're not tracked, and we aren't required to report them to the state, but we want to make sure that we're capturing these efforts moving forward. The state views our contract with an October 1st start date, and the scope of work projections are based on that date. So if you started 6 months later, which many of you did, the actuals should reflect the date they started working on the contract. Therefore, I'm really working right now hard on adjusting those projections based on the actual start dates, and that will be submitted to the state by November 15th. Once that's complete, your program and fiscal analysts will be connecting with you about your specific scope of work deliverables, so you'll know where your site is relative to those adjusted projections. And if you're not meeting your scope of work numbers, we're going to work very hard to help you meet those numbers for the upcoming 2020 federal fiscal year.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that. And I just want to reiterate that we recognize there were a lot of things and challenges that happened this past year, especially related to the contract execution. And our goal is just to help you improve upon what you're doing and us all do the best work that we can do. So like with our scope of work numbers, we saw a similar impact in our fiscal reporting. We don't have those final numbers yet of where exactly we were at with percent spent and percent reported on state share. As many of you know, we're still working through that process with you on finalizing invoice and also getting our prime invoice finalized to submit to CDSS. We do expect that we are going to be fairly underspent this year. Again, a lot of it goes back to some of those challenges that Stephanie was mentioning on that last slide related to the delay in contract execution, getting accounts set up, making sure new staff are trained on the contract. And for some individuals, this was the first grant or contract they've even handled, and it takes a lot of time just to learn how to manage a grant. And so we recognize that there were those challenges, and our goal for moving forward into this next year is to help support you, making sure that if your entity does require getting a project number or account set up for this project, to get that going as soon as possible. If you have hiring that you need to do because you have vacant positions or need more staffing, to get working on those processes, purchasing any outreach materials that you may need, and then just also making sure to utilize these funds to the best of your ability so that you can get the maximum federal reimbursement back to your campus. And those are all things that we are here to help support you through. Overall, we'd really love to see a goal of being over 90% spent by the end of this next year.
Thanks, Naomi. As I've mentioned, we've learned a great deal this past year in working with sites across the state. We've come to understand that this work really occurs in stages or phases, and the sites that are most successful are really meeting their basic contract requirements and have a solid foundation before they start leaping into providing those direct services. And I know that it's very exciting to want to start signing them up, but we really need to have phase 1 completed before we can start moving into that phase 2 and direct services. In phase 2, it's important to have a very solid system for doing those applications, pre-screens, et cetera, and before adding supplemental activities, and even like the restaurant meal program and EBT on campuses, right? Those are phases 3 and 4. And as we review these phases, keep in mind that we'll be focusing the next year on helping our sites progress through them, which means that some of you may need to circle back and revisit phase 1 and those foundational activities. And we're going to provide you with the tools and assistance you'll need to be successful. So when we look at phase 1, those foundational activities, we want to reassure you, like if you look at these 8 kind of general activities, again, we'll break these down even more for you, and we will have a program manager and a fiscal analyst working with you closely on the details within them. This is kind of just a general overview. But first and foremost, you really do need to read and understand your contract. That signed contract is it's our form of communication of what we expect and what you should expect from us. You want to make sure you have your most recent contractor information form, or your CIF, so we know who to contact on your campus. We need to have that information in order to get what is the most updated resources and tools that you need to you, and to be communicating with the right individuals on your site. Before we do your on-site training, we'll work with you on assessing where you are currently at and how we can best support you. Next, you're going to be participating in the required contract activities that include things like civil rights and confidentiality training, and the in-person trainings, and attending quarterly webinars. This is all part of your required contract responsibilities. And we want to be sure you have scheduled check-ins with your CHC support staff. Before those direct services begin, it's important to have your staffing structure in place, and that includes those individuals who are responsible for reporting, who will be doing the application assistance, and all the coordination of activities. So every component of this program on your site, we should have identified some individuals for those tasks.
And then additionally, a couple other things that are really important in this phase 1 are if your organization or entity requires that you have a project or account set up which applies to almost all of our subcontractors, that it's really important to get that set up again. So like I mentioned before, you can start expensing the project, which is the first step in us being able to then pay you. And then also, like Stephanie was saying, all of these things are some of those foundational activities that aren't direct outreach for CalFresh, but there's still all of this time that's being put into setting up the contract and getting forward so that you can get to that point of doing application assistance. And all of that time and effort can absolutely be reported to be reimbursed for. And so keep in mind that while you wouldn't be doing outreach activities during this, there's absolutely still fiscal reporting that can be done to represent those efforts.
Great. And so as we build this foundation, right, this phase 1 foundation of our programs, now we're really ready for the fun stuff, right? The focus of phase 2 is our direct services and our scope of work deliverables. Remember that these deliverables are how we will be evaluated. So your CHC support team will be reviewing these specific scope of work projections and where you're at each quarter and how we can help you reach your goals. So reviewing the scope of work and quarterly goals for deliverables is going to be critical, and how to prepare for these activities that will help us reach those deliverables. So the preparing for application assistance might include things like determining how you're going to serve your students or your clients, if you will have an appointment-based assist, is it going to be drop-in assistance? Where will they be? How will this happen? All of the technological needs to do this work, these are the conversations you're having with your CHC team support, in phase 1, and then this is where it actually gets applied, right? In addition, you've got your CBO portal, your getcalfresh.org portal assist site. You also will be submitting your applications, and with those applications, remember that you're doing pre-screens. You have a contact sheet, and keeping that accurate is going to be critical. There's the post-application process that's included, making sure that all the work that you're doing is captured and entered into your master log correctly and into your forms correctly. There's a follow-up system that also occurs with direct services, meaning that you want to really connect with the clients and students on going to their interviews, turning in their verification forms, and even following up to find out, were you in fact enrolled? Did you get denied? What was going on? And can we support you with your individual counties? That is a role we absolutely play and will support you with, so that you can build that relationship and try to identify where there's some gaps in understanding with eligibility and what we can do.
And then next in this phase, you're also looking at hiring staff. So previously, if you've identified those roles that need to be filled on your team for doing those different activities, it's important to make sure that you have those people in place so that then you can do these outreach activities and these application assistance activities. And keep in mind also that this is a great time to be looking at doing budget adjustments for any supplies that you may need, or it may be anything else that could help support the program.
As we go through this, in terms of reflecting, if you feel comfortable and you're thinking about some of these activities we're discussing, feel free to add those reflections in the chat box, and we might be able to discuss some of those at the end of the webinar. So it leads us to phase 3 with kind of strengthening our program. Again, once you start feeling solid and having your drop-ins and you've got your staff trained and you have all that foundation done, then you're really looking at the semi-annual recertifications, your recertifications, diving in even more with those promotional efforts or those outreach efforts, whether you're doing more work on your website, you're doing more work with social media, you have materials that you're distributing in your community or on your campus sites, at events that exist already or even starting other outreach events. Now we know that some of the systems require having a CalFresh Outreach Day, and we are also here to support you with that work, but recognize that the priority is for you to get that foundational work and that application assistance system in place with staffing before you can actually start having these other events and promotional activities.
And then it's during this phase that we're also hoping you can look at maximizing that federal share reimbursement back to your campus. So that's the money that we're able to write you a check for and send you for these activities. And so that might, again, involve budget revisions. That might involve talking with your program manager and your fiscal analyst to strategize on how best to use these funds and what would help grow your project best.
And then phase 4 is a phase that we want to discuss because you hear about many of these additional activities that really should be once you're through phase 3. Phase 4 is where we're really expanding, folding in other basic needs activities in with CalFresh. Specifically for our campus subcontractors, this would include things like your internship program and working on exemption programs for the 20-hour per work week rule. These are two things that are absolutely critical for the success of your CalFresh outreach program, but these are things that need to happen once you have, again, that foundation built. So having an internship program can help bring in more staffing for ongoing support for the model of an intern coming in, staff training that intern, and vice versa, right? It's kind of a cycle. But again, there's more work to that, and we're there for you. Exempted programs as well. Those are some of the barriers we face where some students are not eligible, and so we're trying to help them become eligible by identifying these programs that increase employability but don't give them a paycheck. So those are two things as an example that you would want to work on later. There are also other programs that Naomi is going to discuss.
Yeah, and so we find that it's always helpful to be able to layer on some other programming on top of CalFresh Outreach, that it's a great way to draw in potentially eligible individuals to help them through the process. And I want to mention that while there's pieces of this that would fall under CalFresh Outreach activities, a lot of this actually falls under other funding. And so it's not necessarily all allowable activities under these CFO dollars because USDA has other programs that fund these activities. And so once you're at that point, though, that you have your program up and running, these are great things to be able to layer onto your CalFresh Outreach activities, as well as seeking that other external funding to support these programs, such as doing farmers markets and making sure that there's EBT at your farmers markets. That's the way that people are paying for food using their CalFresh dollars. Providing market match, doing advocacy work, and also looking at getting EBT on your campuses or with other sites that you might work with in your community, as well as working with the restaurant meals program. And then I see that there's a question, I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I also want to remind you all that we recognize that all of you are individual entities and you have differences, and so we know this isn't a one-size-fits-all model, but we're going to provide some more details on this for you moving forward, just so you have this as a resource, and we are absolutely willing to work with you one-on-one to identify kind of where you're at and what is going to work best for your campus.
And Naomi, I was just going to do a reminder that the Center for Healthy Communities also has an outstanding resource. It's the Basic Needs Training Resource Center, where many of these have been broken down in modules where we have videos and support materials. Your program manager and fiscal analysts are also very aware of these resources and know about these programs. And so as the question is being posed by Karen, would like to learn more about Market Match, absolutely. We do have a team here at the Center for Healthy Communities that we are a part of the Market Match program, and we're absolutely happy to walk you through that.
Thank you, Erin, for sharing that link with everybody.
Great minds think alike, Erin.
Yeah, and if you have any more questions related to any of those kind of add-on activities and programs, feel free to reach out to your CHC program manager, and they'd be happy to provide you support.
Okay.
So now I'm gonna pass it off to Andy, and she's gonna go over some general contract requirements, just some things that we've noticed over the past year, and just want to provide a few reminders on.
Hi everyone, so this is Andy, and I just want to remind you all to make sure that you're keeping your websites updated. And if you're still needing help setting one up, please make sure that you're reaching out to your program manager. Our website templates can be found on our subcontractor resources page. There are 2 versions of them. However, I am noticing that folks really do prefer to use the compact version, which is the one on the right. And then on the left side, you can see that Cal State LA has used the template and kind of made it their own. So they're using the CalFresh food logo. I really like how they're able to use the accordion version, so everything doesn't look so congested. You can drop down, read about CalFresh, eligibility, application process. If you are not linking to our website, just make sure that you're updating those resources because the numbers have changed for this new fiscal year, for example, allotment and gross income. And then thank you all to those subs who have already updated their web pages. I know that that is not always an easy task, so thank you so much. And then I do want to move on to required trainings. So right here we have the civil rights training and the confidentiality training. I do want to go over some of the specifics because not everyone needs to do these ones. For example, you have the civil rights training that needs to be completed once per year, and only individuals participating in direct services need to complete the civil rights training. Then you have the confidentiality training, which consists of those 2 documents. I do want to acknowledge that one is only done once per contract, and those need to be completed by individuals who are participating in direct services and or handling private information. And then here at the bottom, we have a few resources that are also available on our website. The tracking document is for subcontractor use only. So you don't need to submit the form to us. That's really just for you to use, the one on the right. And then there's also the one on the left that does need to be submitted to the Center for Healthy Communities once for the contract. And that's just confirmation that all of those have been completed.
So then the last kind of just reminder slide we have on here are just some allowability topics that have come up we've seen a few times over the past year. So we just wanted to provide you a few reminders. Again, if you're reporting any expenses for either state share or federal share, they all have to be allowable. One thing we noticed a few times and realized on our end that we should have provided a little bit more clarification on was that we know that you all heard us when we have said food is unallowable on this for this funding. But in addition to that, if you were doing tastings, any tasting supplies such as spoons or plates or anything that would go along with that is also unallowable. And again, that goes back to the fact that USDA has other funding sources to support those activities. T-shirts for staff are allowable. That was something, again, we went back and forth with CDSS on for a while, and I just want to remind everyone and confirm that yes, T-shirts for staff are allowed. We are also still looking at getting travel to the California Higher Ed Basic Needs meeting, potentially partially paid for with CFO dollars, if you are interested in doing that. It would have to be prorated because it's not an event that is 100% allowable for CalFresh activities, but a portion of your travel could potentially be paid for using these funds. We are working with CDSS to determine what that % would be and getting that approval. And then I just want to remind everybody of a few resources that we have. Again, I have a lot of Zoom bars up here, so let me see if I can get to where I need to get to. Here we have the SNAP outreach guidance. This will tell you all of the details related to allowability and all of the guidance that you need to know, but we also recognize that it's not the most interesting read, and it doesn't always explain exactly how that applies to your particular situation. And so we're always happy to help interpret that for you if need be on how these requirements would apply to your specific question or your specific situation. We also have on our website our Q&A document. This is something that we've developed which kind of helps that interpretation of the SNAP outreach guidance. And so we just wanted to remind you of those resources, that they are available for you if you have questions related to allowability, but you're also always more than welcome to reach out to your fiscal analyst if you have questions. Before we move on to the next slide, it looks like there is a question related to confidentiality training. And the question is, if there are new staff responsible for the grant and previous staff took the confidentiality training, do the new staff need to take the training? And the answer is yes. So like Andy said, that needs to be completed once per the contract year, but that would be for any staff currently on the contract or any staff joining the contract.
I do also want to note that I have noticed subcontractors have been just doing both of them at the same time with their full team. That's okay too. You're covering all of your bases with that as well.
Great idea.
Great suggestion. And so now we're going to move into a couple of contract reminders.
Okay, so I'm going to cover some program reporting reminders. So each quarter, I do want to let you all know that we are looking for a complete master log, and this would include tabs for quarters 1 through 4. Please include all of these tabs. This means that we also want to see things such as your pre-screening and partner tracking tab at the bottom there. I don't know if it's too hard to read, but it's down at the bottom left. I know that some subs forgot to enter that one into our last reporting, so please make sure that you include that. And then it's also just important that the master log you send to us is not missing any columns from the original. And this is really because master logs all get compiled into one master report, and this is what gets reported to the state. So making sure that they all are completed is really crucial. Please don't delete any tabs or application information. And I do want to let you all know that in the past, in addition to the master log, we were asking for a submitted screenshot of your getcalfresh.org or any CBO account screenshot that you do use. Moving forward, we are no longer going to do that. So we are trying to eliminate additional screenshots just to make things a little bit easier for you, a little bit more simple. That way you have less to report. And rather than just submitting your screenshot, we're just going to be asking for your master log in addition to your login information and password for your CBO account. Again, this is just making sure that a trained individual here at CHC will be able to report for you, and you don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. If you have any questions or concerns about providing us with that information, please reach out to your program manager and we can see if we can work something else out. And then I do also want to let everyone know that we're going to be releasing a short video, and this video is going to go over program reporting more specifically, and this can also be used as a training tool. And what it's going to go over, it's going to go over the master log and the contact sheet. And we're not quite finished with it yet, but I do want to let you all know to keep an eye out. It will be in our newsletter coming soon.
And then we just want to also let you know that we are in the process of getting your year 2 invoice fiscal reporting workbooks updated. They will be fairly similar to the workbook that you are used to seeing. We do have a few additions and changes. One that I wanted to share with you is at the end of your workbook, you will see this new worksheet added that's providing a summary of all quarters. We're going to use this to help you do projections, to help you see where you're at and help you track where you're at as the year goes on. We also have a section down below the numbers that are being reported to just add notes. And so that's for us to be able to provide you any feedback, as well as any suggestions or any, just anything for you to keep in mind as you're moving forward. So that was a new addition to the workbook this year. We also are working on getting your budget updated so that it's your year 2 budget. We made a few changes to the invoice checklist, which is that worksheet at the very beginning of the document, right here. And then some of you had rent in your budgets, and so if you did, we also then added a row for rent in your workbook to report that. Your new workbooks will be sent to you by your fiscal analyst once we kind of wrap up quarter 4 with you. And then I just want to throw out a reminder of doing budget adjustments requests, otherwise known as BARs. Some of you may need to do a BAR for quarter 1 before you submit your fiscal reporting. If you do, we're hoping you can get that to us by the beginning of January so that we have time to turn that around and get it back to you so that you have time to do your reporting. I hope you can keep in mind that we try to approve BARs as soon as we can if they're internal. Sometimes we do need, though, up to 5 days to get them approved, just depending on other things that we may have going on. And then it's just a reminder when the situations that actually require a bar, or if you're wanting to shift funds between different categories. So for example, if you need to move money from travel to personnel, that would require a budget adjustment. If you are adding new overnight travel, or if you're adding theft-sensitive property, such as computers, those are two things that do require a bar and also require CDSS approval rather than just RCHC approval. And then adding equipment is something that requires USDA approval prior to the purchase of equipment. And so keep in mind that any of those items that require CDSS and or USDA approval are going to take longer than just our any of the budgets that we can approve in-house for you. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward in terms of when you might need a budget revision approved and then when you would need to get it to us. And then just for some reminders of what you are submitting to us, there are a couple stages for fiscal reporting. One would be draft submission, and this is optional, but we highly recommend it. It gives us an opportunity to review what you plan to submit before you get any signatures, so that if we find something that needs to be corrected, you don't have to reroute for signatures. And so that's why we recommend it, because it tends to make it easier on your end so that you're not having to do extra work. What we need from you, if you're wanting us to review a draft submission, is your fiscal reporting workbook, which is your entire Excel workbook that has all of the entry pages as well as the invoice and the state share documentation reports, and then also the time and effort forms that correspond to the personnel listed within that workbook. And that allows us to check everything that we need to check before you get signatures and you can get that signed off on. For your final submission, which is your required submission, there are a few different things we require. We need the signed invoice and state share documentation reports. We need copies of the invoice and state share documentation report entry pages. And then we also need the time and effort forms for all staff listed in the invoice or state share documentation report. We recommend that you submit those electronically to us because it helps you be able to meet that deadline of when fiscal reporting is due, and we can then start the process of your check request and getting you paid. But then additionally, we still do need a hard copy of your signed invoice and state share documentation report to keep on file. That can come after the electronic reporting documents are all submitted, but we do need that to have on hand. And then for reporting in general, as a reminder, we have our Center for Healthy Communities CalFresh Outreach Subcontractor website for submitting all reporting documents. You can submit all electronic reporting documents through this website, and then any hard copies that you need to submit, which are really just that invoice and state share documentation reports that are signed, can just be mailed to your CHC fiscal analyst at the address in their signature line. And then again, I had pulled up our CHC CalFresh Outreach website briefly. I pulled that Q&A document up from it, so that's one thing that's on our website, but we have a lot of other resources on our website as well for your reference. We have most of our program reporting templates, as well as some fiscal reporting templates, specifically the time and effort forms. You won't find any customized versions of documents on the website. For those, you'll need to reach out to either your program manager or your fiscal analyst so that we can send you your individual workbook. But for anything that is general to any subcontractor, we have posted on our website. We also have all of our webinars on this website, as well as the PowerPoint presentations. And then, as a reminder, just that helpful Q&A doc that we have on there as well. And then I see a question about when can we get this PowerPoint. We will be wrapping up this webinar, saving all of the recordings and the PowerPoint presentation, getting them uploaded to our website, and we will make sure to share them out with you as soon as possible. And then finally, in terms of program and fiscal reminders, we just wanted to go over the reporting timeframes. We also noticed there was a little confusion this year. We heard some questions and just wanted to clarify when different things are due, especially because we don't want you worried about being late on something when you still have a couple of weeks to do it. So we have 4 quarters that we're reporting on every year. Quarter 1 goes from October through December, quarter 2 goes from January to March, quarter 3 is April through June, and then quarter 4 is July through September. That date is incorrect. We will fix that before we send this website to you, or this webinar to you. I apologize for that mistake. So that should say September 30th of 2020. As a reminder, this contract follows the federal fiscal year. And so then those are the timeframes that you're reporting on. Your program reports are due the 15th of the month following the end of the previous quarter. Your fiscal reports are due 30 days after the end of that quarter. So you have about an extra 2 weeks to get your fiscal reports done after you have your program reporting done. Additionally, I wanted to remind you that there is that process for supplemental fiscal reporting. And so that is if you find a correction that you need to make in a previous quarter, or if you come across something and you are not able to get something to us on time, that there is that supplemental process for submitting fiscal reporting, which would be then due with the subsequent quarter's fiscal reports.
And then I just want to announce that we will be doing quarterly webinars that include updates and information. And we're going to be doing something a little bit differently this time around, where we're going to also include monthly work groups that are more about sharing information between subcontractors. So every quarter we will have one webinar and 2 work groups. With this being said, this is an exception for December. We will not be doing one in December, and we'll start again in January. We're also going to be using answers from your webinar registration to inspire some of those topics for webinars and work groups. And then I also want to let you all know that if there's something that you're thinking about now that maybe you would like us to cover in the future, please, if you can put that in the chat box. And if there's anything that you'd be willing to host, please also write that in the chat box. I know that there are some subcontractors that are really good at stuff. And if you feel like you want to share what you're doing on your campus, please put that in the chat box and we might reach out to you as a co-host.
And then lastly, before we wrap up, we just wanted to provide a few summit reminders. For all of our campus subcontractors, we highly encourage you to register for our CalFresh Outreach Summit that will be held in Orange County right before the CHEBNA event that both the CSU Chancellor's Office, the Community College Chancellor's Office, and the UC Office of the President is putting together. As a reminder, they are 2 separate registrations, and so you need to register for both if you're planning on going to both. Like I said earlier, though, we also are working with CVSS to see if you could get approval to pay for part of your travel to CHEBNA through CFO, in addition to the travel that you likely already have budgeted in your CalFresh Outreach budget to attend our summit. I also want to add that while this summit will have a lot of campus-specific information, if any of our Far North partners would like to join that, they are more than welcome. It just so happens that this year we were able to align it with this other event that was being held for California Higher Ed, and it was great to be able to tie those 2 together. But we want to make sure that you know that if you would like to come, you are more than welcome. We also are planning on hosting a summit specifically for our Far North partners up in Northern California. The time and place will be determined soon, and we will follow up with that. We also want to let you know that the CalFresh Outreach Forum that's hosted by CDSS and California Food Policy Advocates is the same day as we are hosting our CalFresh Outreach Campus Summit in Southern California. So for our Far North partners that may not be going to our CHC Summit, that's a great event for you to attend if you would like to go to that. There's always policy updates and other information that you might find of interest.
And there's just one more thing I wanted to mention, and I promised the CSU Chancellor's Office that I would remind them that CHEBNA, when we say to register, remember that that is through your student affairs office, and that is something that your campus has to decide as an entity on who can go, because there's a limited number of people. It just so happens that many of the basic needs coordinators on the campuses who would be going to CHEBNA also are on the CalFresh Outreach contract. So there may be some overlap, which will be great. But again, if you are working on the CalFresh Outreach contract and are not approved to go to CHEBNA, they may not have space for you. So you just please be sure that you're registering for them separately. We anticipate that the CalFresh Outreach Summit is going to be extremely meaningful and fun. We want to make it a fun event for networking and sharing best practices. And we listened to all of your comments from the previous summit, and we're trying to fold in all of those suggestions So we hope we get to see all of you in February for both of those. And we will see our Far North soon as well for that summit. So thank you, all of you, for taking your time out of your day. If you do have any questions, please, we're going to stay on for a few minutes, so please send them through the chat box. Just as a reminder, you know, we're all here in this together. It's all exciting and valuable work. Again, we're one of the only ones doing this in the nation, and we should all feel very proud to be moving towards this work. Just don't lose sight of our end goal, and be well, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, I just want to say something really quickly. So we will be putting our website URL into the chat box. Just, I know that we referenced our webpage a lot today, and so we wanted to give you a direct link to that. So that is now in the chat box.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hi, Stephanie. That is a great question. So I'm seeing your question related to when you submit your fiscal reports, and it's the same for program reporting, is that you drag and drop them, and then they go into the internet, and who knows what happened to them. And there isn't a way at present to get confirmation that they have been submitted, but we are working on that right now with our computer programming support individuals who we highly value. So we're working on it, but we're not quite there yet. I don't want anyone to worry too much, because we will reach out to you if we don't receive something from you.
And you could always reach out if it's stressing you out. You could always reach out to your fiscal analyst or your program manager and ask if we did receive it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Hi, Ben. Oh, hi, Michael, who is indicated as Ben. You must be sitting together. Thank you for that question. We do have some information related to that, and we'd be more than happy to share. Feel free to reach out to your CHC program manager, and they can help you with that.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in, so I think we're going to end the webinar. But don't forget, if you think of something later, just reach out to us, and we're happy to support and answer any questions you have. So thanks to all of you, and hope you have a wonderful weekend. Many of you may have a 3-day weekend, so have fun and be safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.